chapter 16, but we're actually going to pick up where we left off last week at the end of chapter 15. So I hope you got your Bible open. We're kind of in this section of Matthew where we're walking through these narratives. And so it is so important. I really just want to invite you to open the Bible in front of you and follow along as we walk through this story and these verses. We're going to pick it up in actually chapter 15, verse 29. Okay, but as you're turning there, one of the great challenges of my life this winter has been coaching first grade boys basketball. Okay, my 6-year-old Hayes is a first grader, and man, it is wonderful. But you would think like that I'm coaching goldfish. The way that these kids are, it doesn't matter if it's practice or the games, but I'm out there with them, and I'm kind of intense and direct, and I'm like over communicating to them, and I pull them into the huddle, and it's amazing because they all get down there at this level with me, and their eyes get big and serious, and it's like they're listening to me, and I'm telling them what to do, and then it never fails. They wander out on the court and they just do the opposite of whatever I was telling them to do, and they mean so well. They're so cute, but man, it's the goldfish brain. They wander out there onto the court. And one of the main things I've been trying to teach them is how to just guard a player on the other team. We'll even have them wear like a colored wristband that matches somebody else on the other team. They're supposed to guard that other player. But then when the whistle blows, I look out there on the court, and it's like they see their mom in the stands or their friend on the other court. The other day, Hayes, my 6-year-old, I was asking him, I was like, what were you doing with your nails like during the middle of that play when your guy scored on you? They get distracted. Their eyes wander. The person that they're supposed to be guarding and paying attention to scores. And I'll tell you, I love them, but it is frustrating as a coach to be giving them such simple instructions, same thing over and over again, week after week, and then have them look at me like they mean it, and then watch them not get it. And it reminds me of what it must have been like for Jesus to disciple these first guys that we've been watching. And it also reminds me of what it must be like for him to lead me. There's this old hymn that says, we as humans were prone to wander. And then it says, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Proverbs 4:23 says, guard your heart above all else, for it's the source of life. This, guard your heart, this is the message to his disciples in our text today, and it is God's word to us. We need to guard our hearts against fake saviors and false gospels. We need to guard our hearts. We're going to walk through this passage and look at seeing his heart, then knowing what tempts the heart, and then we'll get there at the end of what it means to guard our hearts. So first, I want you to see his heart. Look with me at verse 29, and as you're getting there, have you ever wondered how God feels about you? Not necessarily in like the moment-to-moment actions, because he does care about the details of our lives. But I'm talking about his overall disposition towards humanity, towards you. Have you ever wondered, like, I wonder how he feels? Well, you don't have to. He hasn't hidden his heart from us. As we enter into this scene, I want you to read this and watch this as Jesus wearing heaven's heart right on his sleeve. Verse 29, it says, moving on from there, Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee. Listen, he's not far away, disinterested in humanity's problems. He came down and walked among us. John says he dwelt among us. Verse 30, he went up on a mountain and sat there and large crowds came to him. You know, mountains in the Bible were places where people went to meet with God. Elevated places. It's almost as if this is where heaven and earth meets, as God sort of condescends down to our human understanding. And so Jesus, he's in Gentile territory here, and he wants them to know that even though they are not Jews, heaven's heart has moved towards them too. And these people aren't just Gentiles, non-Jews. They're like the lowest of society. Look at this, verse 30. It says it included the lame and the blind, the crippled, those unable to speak, and many others. You just see that this mass of humanity, and really the lowest of the low, the people on the margins. And I want you to notice that the values of heaven are very different than the values of the world, aren't they? Like these are the kind of people that society and we as a part of it, we try to hide, but Jesus, he comes looking for them. Look at this moment in verse 30. It says, the crowds, they put them at his feet, and he healed them. You need to know healing, the help that you need, it comes at the feet of Jesus. It'll come when you come to him in some shape or form. And it says in 31 that the crowd was amazed when they saw that those unable to speak, the speaking, and the crippled restored, and the lame walking, and the blind seeing. And this is amazing because remember, they are Gentiles. They're not Jewish people. They don't know God. It says they gave glory to the God of Israel. Jesus is wearing heaven's heart right on his sleeve. He's not hard to find. He climbs right up there on the mountain. And even this crowd of Gentiles, they give glory to the God of Israel because of what they saw. This is what Jesus is doing. He's making himself available. He's drawing near. And why is he doing this? Okay, this is in some ways the arc of all of the Gospel of Matthew. Like, why did he come down from heaven to earth? Why is he getting down and dirty with this mass of humanity? Why is he here? Verse 32 says, Jesus called his disciples and said, I have compassion on the crowd because they've already stayed with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. I don't want to send them away hungry. Otherwise, they might collapse on the way. That word for compassion here, it literally means the inner parts and bowels of a person, the guts. Think about this. The God of the universe, he feels it in his guts, his compassion for humanity when he looks at us, when he looks at you in your weakness and you in your sin. This is a glimpse in this text of God's heart for humanity. I want you to just don't miss this detail. His heart yearns, it aches for us. And I know some of you, all of us go through this. Some of you right now, you wonder if God notices you. You wonder if he cares for you. In your situation, and you weren't here in this story, but it was recorded in the Bible in God's wisdom so that we would read it, you would read it, and you would be able to find yourself in that crowd. With whatever is ailing you, whatever is weighing on you, whatever has made you left out or an outcast, whatever it is, he is inviting you to find yourself in this crowd of needy people falling at his feet because of his compassion. Now, the disciples, as they do, they don't seem to be as moved in the heart as Jesus. In fact, they actually just jump to the logical question. Verse 33, the disciples said to him, "Where could we get enough bread in this desolate place to feed such a crowd?" Where are we going to do this? Jesus, where are we going to get bread for all of these people? Now, if you were here at Rooted like 2 weeks ago, right? Like literally one chapter ago, this should be very familiar to you. Because Jesus had just fed 20,000 hungry people already. So why are they still questioning him? Could they still really be doubting after they saw him do that he could feed these people? You know, one important detail in this scene that maybe points us in the right direction is that if you remember the first time that Jesus multiplied the bread, it was to feed a crowd of hungry Jews, okay, Jewish people, God's chosen people, and now he's in this crowd of Gentiles. So it's possible that the disciples, who are Jewish, they don't yet understand that Jesus came to bless the whole world and not just Israel. It's possible that in their understanding, they're like, well, where are we going to get this bread? They're not even thinking that this is something that Jesus would do. But it's also possible that they're asking this because they don't want to feed the Gentiles. Because their heart is not yet aligned with his. Anyone relate to the disciples there? Now Jesus, as their miracle-working master, that as he keeps huddling them up and teaching them, and they just don't understand, but as their master, he is so patient with them because, listen, forming hearts takes time. Takes time. So look at his patience in verse 34. He says, okay, how many loaves do you have? Jesus asked them. 7, they said, and a few small fish. And after commanding the crowd to sit down on the ground, he took the 7 loaves and the fish, he gave thanks, broke them, and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowd. So these guys, they clearly don't totally understand what's going on. I just want you to notice that Jesus' plan for training them and forming their hearts, he's so patient with them, is to actually call them to serve others when they don't feel like it and they don't understand. And that is exactly what he does for us. He is always calling us into situations that we don't have full clarity on, that our hearts are not yet aligned with, and is calling us to obey, because it is through our obedience that he forms our hearts to be like his. And look what happens as they take this step of faith. Verse 37, they all ate and were satisfied. They collected the leftover pieces, 7 large baskets full. Now there were 4,000 men who had eaten, besides women and children. So multiply that by 3 or 4. It's a massive crowd. And after dismissing the crowds, he got into the boat and went to the region of Magadan. Okay. So we got to see this. We're seeing his heart here first before we turn to ours. You got to see that these miraculous healings and this miraculous feeding, they happen in a real place, right? Beside the Sea of Galilee, and on a real day in history, but they are also pointing towards the future. Jesus, in these miracles, just like with his other ones, he is giving people a preview of the future blessing of heaven. He's pointing forward on that day. He's pointing forward to that day, the place of total healing, the place of ultimate provision, the place of real lasting satisfaction. You know, these people, they ate and were satisfied, but they got hungry again. Jesus is giving people a preview of the future blessing of heaven. He's demonstrating as he climbs up on the mountain that he is the great Messiah that had been prophesied about in the Old Testament scriptures, the one that the prophet Isaiah foretold was going to come and reverse the curse of sin and death. The one with the power to do that. He's going to pour out his abundant blessing on all people. We see him. Here's how I need you to see him. Jesus, the compassionate king who provides the great banquet feast where all will eat and be satisfied. Do you see his heart? Do you see this merciful, compassionate king moving towards humanity that has nothing to offer him, nothing that they've earned. This is sheer mercy and grace, and he's pouring it out on them. So I just want to bring it into your world for a second. The good news, okay, the good news that Jesus brings is if you want heaven, here it is. You can have it. You don't need to wonder and try to figure out like what is the way to get there? Do I have what it takes? Do I have enough gas in the tank? Do I know the right code to get in the door? He says, if you want heaven, here it is. It is through me. Someone here needs to hear God. He is not holding back his heart from you. It is not contrary to God's heart or beyond his capabilities to provide for you, yes, now, but forever. It's what he would love to do for you. The fact that Jesus came and the fact that he came like he did, he is wearing heaven's heart on his sleeve and saying, here I am, here is what I am bringing, here is what I am offering, not just for the Jews, but for all people, anyone who would come. Here's the tension. If Jesus is not withholding his heart and heaven's blessing from us, then why are so many not experiencing it? And to understand that, we've got to turn to the next chapter, chapter 16, to understand it and know the human heart and its temptations. Look at verse 1 of 16. So they got in the boat, remember they left. They go to this region called Magadan. It says the Pharisees and the Sadducees approached and tested him, asking him to show them a sign from heaven. All right, now Matthew, as he's putting together the Jesus story as an eyewitness, he's brought us into this next scene, and it's very clearly set in contrast to the previous one. All right, because Jesus, he's clearly just demonstrated that he came from heaven with these miraculous healings and feedings, echoing all of the Old Testament promises of God being the great provider and the great healer. So he's very clearly saying, he's a giant sign saying, I am from heaven. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they show up and they ask him, hey, would you show us a sign from heaven? And what's interesting about this moment is that the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were actually religious and political rivals and enemies. These guys were like warring. The politics and religion were very, very intertwined in Israel, and they were like warring parties. They did not like each other. They disagreed with each other. They had different theology on some points, definitely different philosophy. It was a power struggle between them until they saw Jesus and what he was saying and what he was standing for, and it became the kind of thing of like, if he's your enemy, then we are now friends. The Pharisees and Sadducees, they united in this opposition of Jesus, and here's why. They saw him as a threat to their power and their position in their little kingdom. So they approach Jesus the same way that, can we be honest? The same way that we do when he threatens our way of life. I know you don't think of yourself as having a little kingdom, but you've got a life, and you've got choices, and you've got resources, and you've got a plan, and you've got goals, and you've got hopes, and you've got dreams. And when Jesus and his teaching and his kingdom starts to threaten that, we do the same thing they do, but in our own way, we power up. We posture up. And so that they say to Jesus, say, hey, we'll ask the questions. And they tell him to prove himself to them. This one, again, the one that has been working these miracles, they say, hey, we want you, like they're getting the first word in. You show us a sign from heaven. And, the Pharisees, they're very sneaky because they are, I guess, technically the resident experts on heaven in Israel. They're the teachers of the law and the scriptures. Like, it's like, okay, so in some ways it makes sense for them to be asking Jesus, like, hey, can you authorize what you're saying about heaven? But the dead giveaway that this is not a sincere question, Matthew says it was a test, is the fact that the Sadducees, they don't even believe in heaven. Like, they don't, the Sadducees, one of the hallmarks of their belief is they don't believe in an afterlife. They were materialists, right? So dead giveaway, they don't think there is a sign from heaven. They are trying to trap him. And so here's what I'm saying. Sometimes when we say things like, God, if you would just show yourself to me, then I'd believe in you. There is a humble way to ask that question. If you're here and you're like, I want to know and I want to believe and I'm trying to seek and I'm trying to learn, Jesus has so many things he would love to say to you and tell you. There are so many rich answers from the scriptures. But sometimes when we ask a question like that, we are actually throwing out a smokescreen in the form of a smart-sounding question to cover the fact that we don't want to believe in him. It's a verbal stiff arm. And we can operate like this for so long. I got these objections. I've got these questions, and you kind of put off the God question and the Jesus question and the how do you explain the cross question and the resurrection question in a way that you fool yourself, and you think, well, I'm just a thinker, and I got these intellectual objections, and even fool others. But you can't fool the God who sees the heart. So look what Jesus does in verse 2. He just calls him on it and he replies, when evening comes, you say it'll be good weather because the sky is red. And in the morning, today will be stormy because the sky is red and threatening. And then here's the punchline. He says, he's talking to the Pharisees and Sadducees. You guys know how to read the appearance of the sky? Okay, you can tell the weather, this physical reality, but you can't read the signs of the times. Jesus, he's going in on them here. He's saying you can see the changing colors of the sky and know that a storm is coming. But you can't see that the kingdom of God has appeared when you are staring right in the face of the king. You're asking for a sign from heaven while you're talking to the king of heaven. It'd be like staring at a green light and just honking your horn of like, when is it going to turn green? They're staring right at him. And so, this is one of the great questions of the Gospels is why, we got to ask this, why can't the leaders of Israel, the religious leaders, the Bible teachers, why can they not see that their promised Messiah, their king, has arrived? It's not because Jesus hasn't demonstrated tons of miracles that could only come from heaven. It's not because he hasn't come right out in the open and said the kingdom of heaven is here. He said that in Matthew 4. It's not because he hasn't been teaching publicly and even in a very nuanced and just helpful way. He's been talking to them. It's because they don't like what they see when they look at him. He is not who they wanted to be king. He is not who they wanted to be God. Jesus didn't fit what they desired. So they couldn't see him. They couldn't see him because they didn't want to see him. And Jesus, who knows the heart, he knows it. Look what he says in verse 4. He says, an evil and adulterous generation demands a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. And then he left them and went away. All right, an evil and adulterous generation. This is a common phrase that Jesus picks up that the prophets of the Old Testament would also use to describe the unfaithfulness of God's chosen people, Israel, who they're the leaders of. And this is actually one of the most intimate metaphors that God uses to describe his heart and the love relationship that he wants to have with humanity is that he says, I'm like a husband and you're like my bride. So to think about it in the positive sense. This is God's desire. It's a theme. The theme of marriage runs all throughout the Bible, and it's ultimately pointing to God saying, this is how I want us to be. This is the relationship I want to have. My heart for humanity is to be its husband. But we see here that humanity's heart, and it's the Pharisees, and it's the Sadducees, and it's you, and it's me, is we are prone to wander. We are easily tempted and lured away looking for better options. This is what we got to see his heart, but then we got to know this about ours. We are always looking for better options than God for pleasure. Better options for power, identity, position. Better options for provision. We get impatient. We are prone to wander. And there's many other lovers, to use the language of Jesus, that we run to instead of God for our desires. But the Bible sums all of them up under this category of the world. Okay, the world. Listen how James chapter 4, who James would have been here watching this whole thing happen. He was a disciple. Listen how James puts it. He says, you adulterous people. He's talking to people in the church, Christians, people that are supposed to be faithful to God. He says, don't you know that friendship with the world is hostility toward God? So whoever wants to be a friend of the world becomes the enemy of God. Now, when James is talking about the world, he's not talking about the world as in the physical world that God created and that he is redeeming and restoring. We think about God's creation. That's not what he means by the world. He's referring to the overall world system and culture that is anti-God. The world in the sense of the way of the world, the way of sin. The world under the sway of Satan. And he says, cozying up to the world makes you an enemy of God because then God becomes a threat to your way of life. If you love the world and its ways, it goes against the grain of God and his. So then you look at Jesus and he becomes your enemy. He becomes a threat. This is what was driving them. It was his kingdom that Jesus was announcing and teaching, and don't forget, so mercifully demonstrating, was a threat to theirs. Are there ways for you that Jesus and his kingdom are a threat to your way of life? Where are some ways that you feel his way, his values, they press on you, his commands, they lead you to places that you don't want to go. They cause you to tear down things you don't want to tear down. Wherever that is, you have the same heart, struggle, tension, temptation that the Pharisees had. And so he says to them, okay, you asked for a sign. The only sign I'm going to give you is, he calls it the sign of Jonah. Now Jonah, famous Jewish prophet, he was famous for hardening his heart towards God and not wanting to show mercy to the Gentiles of Nineveh that God sent him to. So he was famous for being this like stubborn, hard-hearted prophet that God was just like, nope, I'm gonna have my way. And so this is the story where in real history he miraculously forces Jonah to be thrown into the sea. He's in a fish for 3 days. It was this real thing that happened, but also God was using it as a symbol of he died in this watery grave. And then Jonah rises 3 days later to preach mercy to Nineveh. So Jesus says the only sign I'm going to give you is a sign of Jonah. What Jesus is doing, to put it simply, is he's pointing towards the sign of his own death and resurrection that's going to bring about mercy and salvation for the world. He's saying that's the sign that you're going to get. And they don't understand it in the moment. They will see it later and not believe it. But the sign I'm going to give you is really this. Jesus is his final plea on earth of again wearing heaven's heart on his sleeve and saying, here, I came because I love you and I want you back. Even the Pharisees, the leaders of unfaithful Israel. Jesus at the cross, picture this, Jesus at the cross, he is like a faithful, sacrificial husband chasing down a wayward wife, bleeding and dying and demonstrating his love for her. And as he subtly predicts here, it won't be enough for them. And they'll reject him. And as Jesus is training up his disciples, he knows, here's what's important to notice in this text. He knows that his disciples have been raised and formed in this evil and adulterous generation. Their Sunday school teachers were the Pharisees. This is the world that they grew up in Israel. This was some of the formation that they had. They lived in the culture that the Pharisees and the Sadducees had created. So Jesus uses this moment to warn them. He's shown them his heart. He's now exposed what's in the human heart. And now he's going to warn them to guard their hearts from the teaching of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, so they won't be led down their path. Look at verse 5. We got to guard our hearts. It says the disciples reached the other shore, and they'd forgotten to take bread. Then Jesus told them, "Watch out and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees." And they were discussing among themselves. This is great. We didn't bring any bread. Don't you just love these guys? If you really just get into the story and picture yourself in the boat, it's like number one, they were just forgetful and they made so much bread and they forgot to bring any for their journey. But then also, once again, they so clearly have missed Jesus' point. And as a guy that both does literally forget things often, and maybe like you, a disciple that is kind of slow to learn and understand what Jesus is saying, it gives me comfort to see his patience with them here and to see what he makes of their lives as they stick it out with him. Verse 8, aware of this, okay, Jesus knows. He knows. Whatever you're like, he knows. He's with you, and he's for you. He's trying to walk this out with you, and he's got things to teach you. Listen to him. He knows. You don't got to hide from him. And Jesus said, "You of little faith, why are you discussing among yourselves that you do not have bread? Don't you understand yet? Don't you remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000 and how many baskets you collected? Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000 and how many large baskets you collected? Why is it that you don't understand that when I told you, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, it wasn't about bread?" Okay, here it is. They didn't understand yet that the miracle of the physical bread was also a metaphor for his spiritual provision. Okay, they had seen him do the physical miracle. They had not yet fully connected the dots. It seems that of course, why do you need to complain and worry on the boat that you forgot to bring a loaf of bread after he had just done that? So he corrects them gently And he says, like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm pointing, when I say the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees, I'm pointing to the spiritual reality here. And then in verse 12, Matthew, who's recording this, he kind of puts in like, okay, we figured it out. Then they understood that he had not told them to beware of the leaven and bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Okay, this is really the point that this whole scene has been building towards. This is what Jesus wanted them and us to know, okay? The Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were so in love with the world that they had no eyes for Jesus. They were enamored with the world, and they were blind to him. Remember a couple chapters ago, Jesus had called them actually blind guides, people that are leading others, but they themselves are blind because their teaching was leading a whole generation into unfaithfulness. And so what Jesus is doing is he's gathering a group of people who will return to their faithful God, the God that loves them, and he's doing that starting with these disciples. And so he says, be on guard, watch out, beware for this false teaching so that you won't be led astray. So let's end with just here as disciples and as those that are maybe here learning about Jesus and what his message is. Let's sum up what this leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees was. Like what was this teaching that he was warning them about? We could really simplify and summarize it as this. They taught that you can have the kingdom of heaven without the king of heaven. The kingdom without the king. The blessings and benefits of God and of the scriptures. The Pharisees were all about the Bible. But without the one that inspired them, the one that they are pointing towards, the kingdom without the king. Think about it. The Pharisees, they believed they could earn their own way to heaven through their religion. They didn't need God for that. They've got the rules. They've got their man-made traditions. They had found a way to be religious without needing God. So when Jesus shows up in front of them, not only do they not need him, but he's a threat to their way of life. He's a threat to their false religion they'd created. The Sadducees, they were a little different because they didn't believe in an afterlife. So they weren't trying to earn their way to heaven after life. They were trying to build it on earth. So we'll just build it on earth through political power. We also don't need God for that. In fact, he would kind of get in the way. Both of them paid lip service to God and to the scriptures, but only as a means to an end. It's all God was to them. To get what they really wanted, which in their case was power, their positions that they had. The Sadducees, it was for sure pleasure, self-indulgence. All of these things from the world. God to them was a prop, a means to an end. And Jesus is warning his disciples and us to watch out for their teaching, because it can be like leaven, so subtle, but it can spread, and it's seductive, and it is alive and well today. The world, remember that phrase, the world, the anti-God state of mind, way of life, world system, sin. It is, the world is selling itself to us everywhere we look. In our own thoughts and minds of things we've been influenced by, but with every click and every swipe and every advertisement, everywhere you look, the world is enticing and luring and saying, this is a better provision. This is a better pleasure. You could have this power. You should trust in this person. All around us, the world is selling itself to us. Here's a couple specific teachings. The teaching that says, hey, if you're just a good enough person, Or if you're sort of better than the next guy and you can beat him in the race to heaven, then you'll get in. It doesn't matter which religion you are or anything like that, but just be a good moral person. Or the teaching that isn't so much concerned with the afterlife, but just says, hey, you just got to have your best life now. We've got to build utopia here. You've got to have the maximum amount of pleasure that you can have. And actually, Jesus has some good wisdom on that. He can help. Or the teaching that tells you, Jesus, he's like your just ultimate personal assistant that'll help you get the pleasure or the power or the prestige that you want in the world. If you've got him on your side, he can get you indoors you couldn't get into on your own. He could give you a motivational speech every morning before you go out and build your own kingdom. Do you see the subtlety, even the versions of this that include Jesus and don't outright reject him? But here's what we'll bring it home. Jesus, in the contrast of these scenes, he is showing us that, hey, I'm the King of heaven, and I did not come down here to assist you in spiritual adultery. I came to win back my wayward bride. So I'm wearing heaven's heart on my sleeve. I'm pouring out my love and blessing on people that don't deserve it, people that have been unfaithful. His arms are even open to the Pharisees as he's teaching them. He says, my heart yearns with compassion for my unfaithful bride. And I'm gonna put all my chips on the table and just put it out there on the cross, the sign of Jonah, for all the world to see. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, they rejected God's love to run into the arms of the world, and we are tempted to do the same. But the real examples of the story, the disciples are kind of caught in the middle, deciding which way they're going to go. It's the Gentile crowds. These crowds of people, the lowest of the low, the outcasts of society, they've actually suffered and been rejected by the world. And they are running to the feet of Jesus. As we look at the story, Jesus, he wants his disciples, as they stand in between the crowds and the Pharisees, he says, I want you to be like the crippled and the blind and the lame Gentiles, not the Pharisees up on their pedestals. The world had failed these people, and they had found Jesus in the rubble of it. And so maybe for us, the best way to guard our hearts from being lured away by the enticements of the world is to actually lean into heartbreak and suffering and disappointment and weakness and being on the margins and realizing you don't have what it takes and being needy. And then just falling and finding yourself at the feet of the Lord who has compassion on you and will never let you go. Let's pray.